Okay, welcome everybody. This is the third week now of, although I have March 4th, I just realized on the deck there. It's the third week. We are going to review what we did last week, which is around problem framing and solutions and stuff, and where we were with the problem framing. Go over your homework and just recap on there. Then we're going to jump into some customer identification, customer discovery, and a few other really cool, fun topics that are going to help you really get into the meat of what we're trying to establish here, which is the problem solution customer matrix, the market fit, if you will. So we'll go ahead and get started. Let me pin this so everyone can see a little bit better. Okay. So yeah, just look past the little date correction there. All right. So again, we're going to go over the problem framing, problem statements, go over the homework, do customer identification and customer discovery. These two things, 3 and 4, are probably the most labor intensive part of any journey on entrepreneurship. It's not going to be too labor intensive on y'all because we're doing kind of an abbreviated quick version of this, but we will challenge you to go talk to customers and vet out your ideas and everything like that. So it is really good to understand that customer discovery is one of those things that happens frequently and just continuously goes on and on and on as you have a business and as you keep moving your product and evolving your product. So customer identification, customer discovery is very, very important. And then we'll go over homework again for the night. Like I said, we only have a few weeks of homework at the early stages, and then you start working on your video for your 60-second elevator pitch and your pitch deck after a few weeks from now. So we still have homework for this week, but it's not going to be too hard and too bad. And we'll have office hours tomorrow afternoon also to answer any questions you might have. Okay, so problem framing. We talked about this last week about, the whys, the whos, the hows, the whats, the wheres, the whens. They all help drive to that solution, because when you put all those things together, you can ask this last question of like, what if? And that's when we'll transition from talking about problem framing into solution framing after we go through some customer stuff. But that's kind of where it all matches up. That's why you put that last statement, the little how statement of how could this be fixed, a little prelude to your solution statement. And the solution statement is framed very similar to the other one. It responds to these pains and gains that we talked about last week for value proposition, and really sets the stage for a customer to feel like they're getting benefit from your product or service or solution. So we talked about the what's, determining what the type of problem is, who is having that problem, asking the why question, the 5 whys, to gather more information. Why do you think that problem's occurring? What does that make you? And I said this last week, and I really think this is an important kind of thing. You got to kind of embrace your inner therapist. How did that make you feel, right? This is where you kind of elicit more information. You can open someone up, and they're very open-ended questions. So when you're asking these whys, and we'll talk about this more in depth when we go to customer discovery, when you're asking these whys, that's the best way to just kind of simply ask them a question that doesn't lead them anywhere. And that's the concern that we have. It goes back to the bias that we talked about last week, of understanding that if you are building something in a garage and you're not asking anybody about anything, but you love your product and everyone, quote unquote, is going to buy it. But the matter of fact is, more times than not, odds are against you that probably no one's going to like it nearly as much as you, for sure, but certainly not much as you in general, because you didn't really elicit that inputs of understanding what makes them need what you have. So asking the whys, having this kind of mentality of just really open-ended questions that allow them kind of move down their thought patterns, is really important, both when you're framing the problem and much more so when you're doing customer discovery. So the hows, the pain relief, well, that's kind of that statement that says this is how it could be fixed. Again, you're asking more about the whys when you want to find out more information, and the whens and wheres, right? What is the situation and where is the situation when this problem occurs? So we talked about this last week. I'm not going to read it again. I got the highlighted parts. Townsville General Hospital is the where. The overnight shift, that's the people suffering, right? Those are the people that need the gains. That's the when and the who, because they're overnight and the overnight shift. The cardio technologist schedule, that's the what. That's kind of part of the solution, but it's not the whole solution. It's kind of the answer to the problem, but it's not the solution, the delivery of the answer to the problem. And then poorer patient care and worse health outcomes. That's why we're motivated to make a change here. We're motivated to do the how part, the solution part, because we are having poor patient care, poor customer satisfaction. Same thing. When you have poor customer satisfaction, you need to fix the problem to get them back on the right page. And then the how, their hospital should always have a cardiology technologist available. Now, again, that's not how they're going to do it to an extent of like the scheduling and everything that goes along with it, the staffing, the funding, you name it, right? But this is just an example, or like I said, a prelude to where the solution needs to start. You got to first frame these two things in order to truly understand how you're going to build that solution. Okay, so let's do a little homework review. I have both the teams' homeworks. I only got homework from two of the teams. You'll know who you are and who you're not. So it's really important to get us the homework so we can, let me move my screen up to the monitor here. All right, does everybody see my shared screen, Ron? Good, and see it large enough too? All right, cool. All right, so let's go to team one here. Actually, no, I was going to start with team three. Team three, I like the way you laid this out. You really got the who, what, why, where, when, and how. I think a little bit when I was reading through these earlier today, that there's not enough really description around the really when, or sorry, but what is the outcome of the problem, right? I mean, you're talking about toxic has that PYR3 is toxic and poor stability and has shown declining academic popularity from the 2016 and 2020 as observed by declining PubMed citations. This part, I know it's kind of talking about eating into the profit and everything else because it seems like there's dwindling interest around this, or I'm not sure actually what the problem is completely, but that's mostly because I'm just digging into this, right? Y'all know this far better than I do at this point. But it's like I'm curious is like, why is the relevance dwindling a little bit? And then where I didn't really understand this, and it might have just been because out of context, but is the problem only in Germany, or is that the start, the sigma of the problem? A little bit more about is this a larger scale problem? Because we're starting to set up what we kind of see in the earliest stages of like what the market opportunity is here, right? So if it's only happening in one geographic location, or it's happening in a very niche kind of place, that's not to mean that it's not a very viable solution that can make a lot of money. It's just that, is that the truth here? So that's one thing. And I'm going to let y'all kind of respond here in a second. I'm just kind of going through some things. I thought the rest of it was pretty good though, right? It kind of encapsulated when we're having a problem. We do give a case here, so I am saying it here because of a lack of non-toxic compounds targeting TRPC3. Therefore, it should strike sooner rather than later. I think overall, this is a pretty good problem statement, right? And I think it's got everything it needs, kind of well formatted. I got it, kind of in my structure that I can basically understand it. It's not in a statement like we put it the other day. And I want to encourage you with the follow-up on the homework is to actually restage and reshape this into more of a statement, right? Now we kind of have the bulletized form. And the reason I say that is because when you get it down to the statement that we talked about earlier, the one that I gave you an example of, you can start to see that as the basics and the start of your elevator pitch, right? It's the start of your narrative. If I were to go through this and try to do this in a elevator pitch, I wouldn't say who, what, why, when, where, and I wouldn't necessarily stage it like that as either. I might, but I might not, right? It depends on how I can kind of word this thing and wordsmith this thing to be a compelling statement of a few sentences or a few paragraphs with a few sentences each, but something fairly concise to describe the problem, when and why, where it occurs, and then a little prelude to kind of what the fix is, the start of what the fix is. And again, what I'm saying is like when we start challenging you in the next week or so, and we'll talk about a little bit tonight to do an elevator pitch, which is 60 seconds, you have to be very good about deploying the information you have without going into too much detail that you don't get anything kind of that hook in that first 30 seconds of where the problem is. And as we go through the problem tonight and talk about the customer segmentation and then go into the solution side of things, you'll kind of see that actually makes up your elevator pitch speech, right? If you had a 40 word, 50 word, 60 word, 100 word problem statement, then a few words about your customer segmentation and the pains and gains, small insights into their value proposition, and then leveled in the solution after that, that's about 30 seconds delivery real quick to deliver your elevator pitch. And that's why we kind of start this. It starts by seeing where exactly the product market fit is and how well it fits, but also starting your narrative. And I'm going to stress that a lot because you might think that it's not that important, that the science is important. I've looked at some of these decks again today also, and they're really, really compelling data-driven, science-driven decks. but they're certainly not a deck that you would give an investor. And I think all of us would probably agree to that, right? They're very, very rich in data and very rich in science. And that is not necessarily the whole picture of what an investor wants to hear. So what we're working on is kind of how to get that pitch so that you can deliver it to a large group of individuals. You can deliver it to a large swath of different individuals at different times, but it's a common narrative across all. When you're talking to investors, you only have 60 seconds. You want to be able to deliver it. You don't want to pull up your slides and your science slides and everything else. Now, if you're giving a science-based workshop and you're giving a speech to your peers and doing things like that, obviously you want to use that other one. But I will also challenge you to think that maybe a combination of both the business kind and the science kind put together would be a more compelling thing for a wider audience. So anyway, I think I've beat that enough. That this is really the start. So your challenge for the homework for team 3 is to turn this into a problem statement, more like the one we gave you an example for.
Okay. Yeah. Brian, just a quick note. You're sharing the screen that says homework review right now and not the actual, what the submission is.
Well, gosh, that'd have been, I should talk that whole time about the
yeah, apologies. I sent you a message, but
Nah, I'm speaking and talking and all right, let's try this again. Okay, now you probably see it. Yes, okay. All right, so I'm going to say everything I just said again. No, I'm not. I think you got the context of what I'm saying. Certainly you got it kind of beaten out there a few times. Now you're seeing what I'm talking about. It's now I know why Rohan was getting into this document to kind of tell me something. So what I'm saying here, everything I just said, I want to see this kind of in more of a statement that's like the example that we gave in class last week and is on the deck today as well. All right, because this is where we'll start kind of the narrative and the pitch. All right, any questions from team 3?
Yeah, so I had a question.
Yeah.
So we did struggle a little bit with the where aspect of it because we were looking through the like declining, sorry, my dogs are barking in the background, the declining popularity of PYR3. It was more of like a global decline, right? Because we're looking through PubMed, so it's not very like location specific. And we didn't really know how to narrow that down. So that's why we picked Germany, which is like the headquarters of Sigma Ulrich. Could you maybe like, I don't know, kind of guide us a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think that's, we haven't talked about it, but we will. You could also say that, you're picking a beachhead target, right? It's a beachhead strategy. And this is the early adopters. They're going to be early adopters of something novel, or maybe it's where the problem is happening the most. So it needs the highest priority. There's a variety of reasons why you might say, well, this is a problem all over, but we're not going to focus everywhere. Or maybe it's a problem in this geographic area and you can focus that. So it's not a bad thing to have a very specific location, but we also want to make sure that we're not saying and making it sound like this is the only location, right? And then I think that's kind of the message there is it's okay to say, yes, this is where it's happening and this is why we chose this area. Just make sure you're also alluding to a larger market segment if it exists. That answer your question?
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from team 3? Okay. I do have team 2's homework right here. Just hang on a second. Sorry, everybody. This is why we hope to get these in those team folders before. Come on, get over there. Before the class. Oh, now I see 2 copies up there. I see. All right. Sorry about all the confusion tonight. We'll get this worked out. Okay, so let's go to team 2 then. I'm assuming all these are the same. We just individually have all dropped them in there. Okay, so team 2. Okay. All right, you'll put in a nice little deck for me. That's great. Okay, so who, what, concern everyone, customer, the farmers and industries, what, not enough land for crops, not enough food for humanity, Why? Crops take time to grow, not efficient, 1% of sun energy transform, vulnerable diseases, weather, water, salt, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see. So this is just a repeat of the same. Oh, okay. You're starting in the solution with the how. Great. Available solution, organism, genetically modified, vertical farming, natural selection, chloroplast engineering. Okay.
Just Brian,
Yeah.
this last slide is just a longer answer, but we try to resume on the previous slide, so it doesn't matter the last slide.
So this slide right here, the problem one that I have in the middle of the screen, that's the one that's got basically all the information from the previous two?
Yes.
Okay.
But we try to resume to make it more appealing for investors.
Perfect. All right. So let me just look at this one. Let's read this one. Everyone work unable to guarantee an adequate level of daily calorie for food or from food, the continuous increasing of the human population. Obviously, yep. Has to be accompanied by adequate increase of food production. The worldwide demand is expected to increase 59 to 98 by 2050. I'm obviously jumping words here, leading the estimated increase of crop production. At the same time, the improvement of food quality is also particularly important. Okay, so food scarcity is basically the problem as a population grows, right? Guarantee adequate food security around the world, and particularly in low-income countries. A novel transformation vector of the plant. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think this is good, right? Again, just like in the team 3, you kind of have it broken down into those statements. And this is pretty close to what the problem framing example that we had as well, right? Except it's more bulletized. I like this as much as I would like it without the bulletized, right? So there's not really much you need to do here. But as you put this together, the comment and the feedback I would get is, make sure that the what doesn't go too in depth. I don't think it does here, but when it comes to delivering the elevator pitch, if this part gets too wordy, that's when you're going to go over the 60 seconds, right? So I think that's the area of quote unquote concern, but it's not a lot of concern. I think you've done a good job of putting a pretty concise, well-framed problem together. So good job. Any questions?
I have one question. So do you think we should keep like long or shorter? Because at the beginning we wanted to make it shorter, make it more easy to understand and go straight to the point.
Yeah.
We say just in case we can keep more details, but it will be more like business plan side, not in a presentation, because otherwise there is too much information.
Yeah, I think for an elevator pitch, since you're just going to be delivering it off the cuff right there, but I mean, you'll have it well scripted and well practiced. If you want to put this on a diet and cut out some of it, I think that'd be good. And I think you'll be required to, just as you kind of get into it. If you already had some ideas on how to kind of make it a little bit more concise, that's perfect. When we start moving this into the pitch deck, you will definitely need to break this up into a few different segments of information, right? As you're describing the what, as you're setting the stage for the information and delivery of the narrative. So I think we'll also take another look at it and just kind of the word usage and the word smithing and just maybe even how we can add some imagery. See, another great thing when you're doing a deck is adding imagery can deliver the words you're trying to say, right? So you could have more descriptors below things about population growth and food scarcity and the increase from 58 to 98%. I mean, you could have 1 or 2 slides that actually represent that graphically, right? And it's so much easier. Then you're just delivering it kind of verbally on top of it. So we'll definitely dig into that when we're doing the pitch deck. Right now, if you want to put it on a little bit of a diet, I would recommend it. But it's, yeah, so I think that's a good suggestion that you made there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions from team 2? Okay, so let's jump to team 1. Thanks everybody for getting your homework in. I mean, I like to get it in earlier, but did I look at it early this morning? If y'all got it in yesterday? No, I'm a typical teacher. I looked at it right before the class, right? And so not literally right before, but I do appreciate y'all getting it in there. So we've started, and I appreciate the effort everybody's put forth. All right, so team 1, I thought this was a good first draft or first round of this as well, right? Everybody's just kind of taking their first pass. I mean, they might have taken a good 20 passes internally before they got to the one they want. But what I'm saying is kind of the first draft. It's pretty good. But I don't really, I feel like it's kind of going in and out from problem to solution. Now, I might be wrong, but if I'm reading it the way I'm reading it, and and so just everybody knows, this was kind of in more paragraph form, and I kind of broke it up mostly by sentence, but just to kind of talk about it, right? We have the messenger RNA, small interfering RNAs, RNA plasmids, and anesthesia. Oh my God, I'm not going to say some of these words. And just because CRISPR-Cas9 have emerged as promising therapeutic agents in the prevention and treatment of disease. However, the promise of these therapies is limited by our current ability to deliver these payloads safely and effectively. Okay, that's a good setup for the problem, right? Lipid nanoparticles offer a method for drug delivery that has the great potential to resolve the problem. In fact, LNPs have already been employed as lipid nanoparticle mRNA vaccines against coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19. See, this is kind of more the how a little bit earlier, right? So you're setting the stage, I get it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when we're talking about the larger stages you have to set, we need to make sure it kind of flows, right? So this is what we talk about all the time. And these are kind of like weird little stage names of things that we do when you're doing presentations, right? But when you're doing a pitch, you got to have a hook, right? You got to have that initial piece that brings someone into what you're saying, brings someone into your narrative. I mean, think movie plots, right? You have a heroine, you have a hero, you have a plot, you have an antagonist, you have a protagonist, you have all these arcs that go around and telling a story. It's the same thing when you're pitching a deck. You have to set the stage and then actually, figure out the best way to hook them in. The best first hook is trying to make people believe in what you're saying because they can be empathetic to it or sympathetic to, and B, try not to alienate too many people that don't have that problem, because most of those people will stop listening, right? So the idea there is to kind of set this up and not go into the solution too early, because it really hasn't established that hook yet of feeling that pain. And that's kind of what we talk about. All right. So, I think this third little section here is probably closer to the solution than anything else. Okay, so go back to it. However, the current standard, again, we're talking about the current standard again. So this is part of the original problem. Synthetic ketonic LNPs are not feasible long-term options for treating chronic diseases, as they are foreign, induce an immune response, and can be cytotic when administered chronically. Okay, non-synthetic LNPs have been developed to overcome some hurdles. And so even though it kind of starts off sounding like there's another thing, but you go into the limitations of these two. So these first two little sentences, and then skip that one, and the second two sentences, those all really set up. And I like this. I like this because you really establish an overall problem and then talk about two solutions that are inadequate, right? That to me is also part of that hook. Okay, so that's good. All right, thus a large swath of diseases. Okay, this is the end result when you don't have, stable and good solution here, right? Is that thus a large swath of diseases that would benefit from translational gene therapies are limited only by the effectiveness in the delivering of these agents. And that kind of encapsulates the problem right there. That's kind of a perfect statement. It's like all this stuff is there, but none of it works well. And this large swath of diseases are still allowed to kind of get past because the therapies are very limiting in their prevention or curation, because they're just not, the delivery system is not effective enough. So I got that, right? And I think that's good. So I think the thing here is to kind of reshape and restructure your statement here. I think you have almost all of it here. And we just need to reshape it into like a cohesive problem statement. So I think it's really good. I appreciate that. So everybody did really good. So team one, do you have any questions? If you're talking and on mute, we can't hear you.
Hey, sorry, I was unmuting. Right. This is Anna from Team One. I guess actually my question is, so I guess the problem that we have is that it's not necessarily that this is just recreating, it's not a completely new solution, right? It's a problem, it's, I guess, an improvement of something that's currently there, which is why we have to set all the problems beforehand. So I guess how would you advise to set a hook much earlier than that, without then saying like, oh, but there's, you know what I mean? That's why we set it kind of in that format with everything that is, but actually it doesn't work. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm imagining it in the audience, you saying the problem statement and someone immediately going, oh, but there's this, and that solves the problem, right? But based on your research and why you're presenting a novel solution, or not, not a novel solution, but a different solution, is because the thing that they just said is ineffective as a delivery mechanism, right there. So I get it. You kind of want to cut the question off before it even asks. In this case, because you've delivered them very concisely, I don't think that's a problem, right? You don't want to it's okay not to have every answer before they're asked. In fact, sometimes it's better to let them ask because they're engaging, right? If you're in a big delivering to a big audience, no, you want to kind of deliver it. No one's going to be asking you questions during your pitch. You just keep moving forward. If you're having one-on-one conversations, doing customer discovery or sales or whatever you're doing, and that you want to kind of deliver, hey, we've done our research. We know these areas do exist, but we also know they're not effective. But I'll ask you, what's the harm in you delivering a very blanket statement that says current delivery mechanisms have proven to be ineffective in these ways, and not actually going into synthetic versus non-synthetic, so on and so forth, right? And if they do bring that up, that's a challenge for you to now open that part of the conversation up around that, you know?
Okay, I understand that. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Hey,
right.
Brian, this is Andy. I wanted to ask, I like that generalizing the problem, and maybe we could start out with that second to last paragraph and modify it. I was wondering for this portion of our elevator pitch, how short should it be, in terms of word count or sentences or paragraphs or things like that? And then I also wanted to ask if you could, on that document, if you could highlight things that you think we could leave out.
Yeah, I mean, well, I might need to follow up on the things you might leave out, but just because I want to, kind of keep to the thing and not get my mind distracted on the things I need to highlight. But say the first part of your question again, because I had the answer, then I answered the second part.
No worries. I was just kind of asking what would be a good length for discussing this part of our problem solution,
I wish I had a hard and fast answer for you, but it also kind of depends on how you talk and how you frame yourself for talk, how you kind of set your cadence for how you're delivering it. I mean, this right now, more than likely, I could read this off and hit it underneath a minute, and my speed would probably need to be about average plus 10%, maybe 20%, in order to get all this done in 1 minute, right? It's a lot of words, a lot of large words. You heard me get, kind of hung up on the first set there. So, obviously I would practice this more and be able to deliver this. It's not a hard and fast number though. I mean, it's not like 100 words equals those things. It kind of depends on just the kind of cadence. And when we're in these things, what Shelby and I like to do is line up 20 people and facing another 20 people, and they have to deliver their elevator pitch 10 times rapidly. They have to do their elevator pitch for 60 seconds. Then they get 60 seconds of feedback from the other person they're facing. And then they switch seats like musical chairs. And it really starts. And the reason I bring that up is if you start thinking like that, thinking about that, and you start practicing and giving it to people and letting different people hear it, you're going to start getting the cadence that you need to be able to deliver something kind of confidently without having to take a huge breath and then being out of breath in 60 seconds because you just ran through it, right? Because you don't want to run through it. You want to be able to actually have it be a 60-second conversation where you're the only one talking, right? A 60-second monologue inside of a dialogue, right? So, that's where it's going to come, kind of an understanding of where I need to trim some of my statements in order to fit it in, or add a little piece here to make sure the hook is a little bit better, and then sacrifice a little piece here to make sure I'm in time. I think that's the best answer I can give you, that there's not a real answer other than kind of practice.
Okay, thanks. And a quick follow-up question. How much do you think it would add to discussing our problem if we were to try to frame it in the perspective of a hypothetical stakeholder? I'm kind of making it more into a story.
Yeah, there are times that I think that is the absolute right way to go. And that actually is more times than not. And then there's times where I don't really think it is. And sometimes in the scientific, more kind of structured world, having a persona that you're walking through can be very good. But it can also, if you do it in a weird way, it can be too cutesy and it kind of throws everyone off of what you're trying to get, right? Last year, I think the winning one had this, but I'm not quite sure. But I know one of them had it, and I've seen this really do well in other things when you're talking about healthcare, especially someone suffering from some sort of disease, right? And the focus of the problem and the focus of the solution is on that disease. So you immediately set the stage. Erica did this. That's what it was, about her father, actually. And so let's take a little side time to talk about this. Erica actually, in her pitch that I've seen her do, she talks about her dad in a situation, that he suffered from early in his life. And if I remember correctly, and it's kind of set the stage. And let me tell you something. That was Erica allowing herself to be vulnerable to pitch an idea. She's not utilizing that in a bad way. She's just basically opening up the audience to talk about something that's very near and dear to her, right? Something that happened to her, something that she experienced, that experiential learning that really comes across in a good way when it's delivered properly to convince someone. So in that regard, using an actual person can be good. Using a persona is not as good, but can be effective. Keeping it kind of on the serious side, especially if we're talking about something that's curing diseases, can be very compelling, because in that audience, you may see someone who has suffered from that, has a father, a mother, a daughter, a son that suffered from that, or what have you. So using those personas, whether real or made up, it can be very, very effective. The other side of the persona is kind of making up the cutesy kind of, hey, this is Paperclip Bob, right? I've seen those work very effectively. I just don't recommend them in kind of on these serious kind of presentations.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Ron, give me the thumbs up that you see homework review in the bigger screen. All right, cool. All right, so let's move forward. All right, so who is your customer? We talked about the problem. So now let's pivot into the next block, which is the customer and the ID in the canvas there, right? So this is where we talked a little bit about it last week, but we're going to talk about it even more in depth tonight, about customer segmentations and customer identification and customer types, and then customer discovery. And this is my favorite thing to talk about, because it's my favorite thing to do. Yes, I'm an extrovert, if you hadn't already guessed. I love talking to people. I'm the person that all my family gets really aggravated at me because I'm the one in the grocery store still talking to someone 10 minutes after they want to leave, right? So I don't apologize for that. It's me doing customer discovery all the time. So the thing here is, like, the reason I love it so much, yeah, it kind of fits into my personality, but it's me discovering problems that I feel like I could potentially fix, right? No, I just don't walk up to someone in the street. Well, okay, I do that. But when I'm doing customer discovery, but when I'm in normal conversation or anything, even when I'm talking to someone I know, or maybe I just met, I'm listening for ideas. That's just who I am. That's the way I am. And what I found is that attention to customer discovery, that attention to connecting with my customer, allows me to go ahead and start identifying who my customer should be. Also, it helps me identify who my beachhead customer should be, because I might have 5 different customer types, but only one is the one I'm going to target the first, because they're the early adopters and the earlier side of the customer evolution, life cycle evolution of growth, right? So I'm going to try to get that group of people that I know I can kind of get good information from and understand, and then pivot my solution a little bit to better fit them. And then I keep validating and validating and validating and validating. Also, what I'm establishing is those first set of customers, or at least those customers identified in the first few rounds of customer discovery. Those are my champions, right? When I go back to them, because I always keep their contact information and say, hey, look, I heard what she said. I made some changes. Just wanted to run it past you. All needs 2 minutes of your time. More than not, they'll say, great, give me a call, or we'll talk about it and everything else. Now I've got them feeding me more information. And if you haven't already kind of come along to what I'm saying is, I've hooked them, right? I got one hook, and then I sunk it a little bit deeper on the next one. And if I can talk to 100 customers and get 10 of that 100 to be that early adopter, the one that's giving me more information, and I have another 20 that are interested mostly in my solution, and maybe another 10 on top of that are the kind of interested in my solution, I'm off to the races. I know I have something that can be viable. I just got to figure out how to make sure that my minimum viable product, my first launch, fits that early majority, that early innovation group, the early adopters that I really want to target. Okay, so let's break this up. So the 2 things that we're going to break it into is like customer segmentation and then customer identification. So segmentation is big picture, right? It's like a variety of different things that allow you to group your customers by specific things. So segmentation, dividing similar customers into homogeneous groups for the sake of classification and study. This happens in a few different ways. We'll go through those. So think geographic, right? So we're in the Mid-South. We're a different set of customers than the West Coast, different set of customers than the East Coast. We're in Tennessee. We're a different set of customers from Florida, different set of customers from Texas. Right? You see where I'm going from this. We're America, United States. We're the northern, North America. We're the northern hemisphere, right? You can slice and dice this geographic thing into a variety of different levels, right? The only one that encapsulates us all is we're on Earth, right? But are we all, right? We got several people up in space too, but that's a very, very small niche of customers, right? So the idea here is like looking at the geographic landscape. How do we break these people up? It would be very important that if I was selling sunscreen, that I'd want to target my customers in sunny areas or moderately sunny areas. And I could break that down even further into demographics. So customers grouped based on certain characteristics like gender, age, marital status. And look, this whole demographic conversation, this is not about identifying people for any reason other than to group them into target audiences. So if I'm going through this process, I'm building something around, let's just use the sunscreen example. I'm going to target a specific group of people. And I'm going to say females between the ages of 25 and 55. That's how I'm going to start breaking it down. Yeah. Do I know males are going to buy my product? Yes, but my product's for kids. And I think we can all probably guess, statistically speaking, that the mom or the single parent in other cases, or one of the moms, what have you, is going to be probably buying that sunscreen more than another group, right? And more than another partner of any other type. And so we can kind of group these people into that, right? And we're not slicing and dicing for any other reason other than to get to logical groupings. So carrying again on that sunscreen. So females between the ages of 25 to 55 have 1 to 3 children, have a medium income of household income of $50,000, live in a sunny or a moderately sunny geographic location, and spends at least 2 sessions outdoors 2 days a week for 2 hours apiece, right? So I've kind of broken it all down into a variety of geographic, demographic, and actually behavioral, because they seek to be outdoors, groupings. And I'm starting to get to know my customer much, much better, right? And I'm thinking all along the lines of what the problem is for this group, and then how to classify each part of this group so I can find motivations. We talked about that last week too, about the decision matrix, the FOG behavioral model, where you need motivation, ability, and a trigger. These are all the things we're trying to define. What are the motivations? What are the abilities? And what are the triggers, right? And so that's how we do this. And then firmographic, same as demographic, yet focus on organizations and not the individuals, because we have these things, we've all heard of this, B2C, B2B, right? I can put groupings of businesses together, supply chain businesses, pharmaceutical businesses, healthcare businesses, right? Customer contact businesses like retail. These are all things that I can take groupings of by the way or how they do business, right? And so that's another one as well. So that's firmographic, obviously from the word firm. Okay, then a couple of other, the psychographic intersection of behavioral tendencies and the core beliefs. So this goes a little bit deeper, right? This is not just their behavioral tendencies, but this is their core beliefs. The reason why their value propositions, internal value, not propositions, but their value belief system is what I meant to say. How they believe these things and how does that affect their behavioral tendencies? These, again, are not for classification for any other reason other than to say, we want to get to know our customers so well that we can build a narrative that they will then buy our product, because we know that the value proposition that they're hoping for is there. All right. So, and then there's the last one, the SMART, which is a combination from the above. It's like taking them all together and looking at them in that graphical lens of saying, okay, do I have any other groupings that I can say are part of this group? Right. And so is this group intact, or does this group belong with another group? Right. And so there's a lot of things to understand there as well. But these are the segmentations. All right, so to further break it down into identificational models and segmentation types, there are 5 different just types as well. And they're very important to understand after you've kind of broken up the types of customers or the segmentations of customer groups that you're looking. So you have the different groups, right? And we're getting down to something we'll talk about also, which is like building the persona, right? The representation of your target customer. All right, so let's go through these types real quick. So mass market. sounds exactly like it is, right? Typically marketers don't distinguish between different customer segments in this thing because it's so large, right? We're talking about a large population of people. Note, if you're building something for everyone, you're generally building something for no one. So there's not the global mass market. There's very few things on this earth other than probably things related to energy and breathing and stuff like that we're having to have more focus on these days. But, you know, and internet, you know, that wasn't a mass market, but it's growing into be a mass market because now 4G products and everything else are moving to other countries. 5G is moving up, 5G is going around the world. You know, internet, we've seen the Starlink from Elon Musk. We have the Google things up in space. We have all the satellite internet. So it's not only becoming something where the mass market in this case is the whole globe, where earlier we talked about things that get in the front of a product being successfully launched in this mass market, which is geographic constraints. Is it even technically possible? Is it fiscally possible? And so on and so forth. So when you start getting to those things, and as time progresses through technology and things start to get better and better and better and miniaturized, better power consumption, better time to death as far as battery goes, then you are actually moving further into the mass market. There's something else that are now coming out, right? I mean, the metaverse is going to be something that is very much targeted at a very large group of people, right? A very large mass. All right, niche, kind of the opposite, right? A very small, carved out, specialized customer segmentation. These are people in your space that might be infected by a specific disease or some sort of crop that is predominantly an issue, right? So this is something that is like, a niche doesn't have to be kind of alluding to something of size. It's really just something that is specific, right? So you can have a very large niche market. It probably won't be mass market classification, but it is for a very specific group of people. All right, segmented, a model that distinguishes between segments with slightly different needs and problems, right? So you might have different levels of the customer. This kind of goes into the consumer customer side of things, like who is the one that's actually paying and who is the one that's actually using, right? So you can have segments inside of segments. Diversified, serving two or more unrelated customer segments with very different needs and problems. You know, I am a company that has multiple products that go for multiple segments or multiple niches, or maybe I have one product for segment, one product for niche, and several products for the mass market, right? I'm very diversified across the board. You know, think of companies that do shipping, manufacturing, fabrication, delivery, distribution. You know, those are all very diversified across a large segment of business types. And then multi-sided, serving two or more independent or interdependent customer segments. This is one that my last business did. I had two groups of individuals, and they were at two different levels. I had to both sell to my customer's customer and then my customer, right? Because if my customer's customer bought from my customer, then I got paid, right? And so that was the kind of thing, and the whole solution was for those two levels. So it was really kind of multi-sided. You can think of all this also as like B2C on one side and B2B on the other, right? So you're kind of the middle product. You know, that's multi-sided as well. So that's how you kind of break down these segmentations to get a little bit of better understanding. Again, all we're doing is peeling the onion here to get a better understanding of at least our beachhead market. Okay, so moving on from that, I'm gonna take a quick second, just ask anybody if they have any questions about the customer segmentation and identification. Okay. All right. I think most people tell you that this is like my favorite picture. You'll see this out through a variety of my decks. It kind of always kind of comes in at the right moment. This guy just sitting there thinking about opening up his mind and really thinking outside the box, right? That's what I see in this guy's face right here. Be your inner scientist. All right. So this is me telling you that take the box that you understand already as an inner scientist and live outside the box and take that same mentality towards a new space, right? Towards customer discovery. We're going to talk about a lot of kind of scientific model stuff here in the next section of our conversation tonight. All right, so here's the customer discovery method. And like I said, you'll start seeing some words that probably are pretty, you know, you have a lot of experience with. So observing and defining a phenomenon, something that's happening in your general space, in your sphere, or maybe it's not in your sphere, maybe it's out further, or maybe it's in some geographic area, but you have the ability to observe and define that phenomena, that occurrence, right? You have an understanding of where it is and how to find it. And that's a big part of it. First thing you need to do is observe. I generally, when I start thinking about an idea, I will put myself in an environment where I can observe that idea. And what I'm saying by that is like I can observe my hypothesis of what the problem could be and kind of my general concept of what a solution could be. But I need to look into the environment of where it's going to be in order to get a better understanding of that problem, right? How it occurs. Is it organic? Is it triggered by something? Is there a set of triggers that have to occur before it happens? I want to know all that behavior around the problem. So first thing is an observation. Next, developing hypothesis, starting to kind of break down your theories about what the solution could be for the problem, right? This is your basic conceptual business idea. Conducting an experiment to test a hypothesis. I mean, quite simply, this is what we're talking about. Observe, build a test, then do the test, then report on the test, and then make changes to keep going forward and forward and forward. So, breaking it down, we know how to do this. Define the hypothesis, form a hypothesis that defines both the problem and the solution you're proposing. A simple way to frame this is to fill in this following sentence. My idea solves blank by blank. This is an easy way to then go out there after you start talking to customers and after you've kind of elicited the feedback and after you've kind of asked the open-ended questions. Now you can come back even in that same conversation and say, well, I really appreciate your time. Let me just give you an insight to what I'm talking about. My idea solves this problem by doing this. And then that opens up the next level of conversation. Now, the difference between the lab type scientific method and this open observational scientific method is that this is very, ethnographic, right? This is very, archaeological. This is very looking at the space and there and seeing what's going on, right? So when you're talking about this and you're saying the statement, you're really trying to elicit feedback from the person in a lot of ways, just to kind of make sure that your hypothesis checks, right? You're looking for the test. In other areas and what y'all are doing, very scientific, you're going to be doing the same thing from data-driven science, right? You're going to be in the lab testing out the different delivery mechanisms or things to put on the plants to get rid of the bad things. These are all tests, but some of these tests, I just want to, kind of lay this out there, are more customer interaction tests, right? So the hypothesis needs to be tested through conversation and interviewing the customer. Okay, define your assumptions, right? It's not a bad thing to have assumptions. It's a bad thing to be biased by your assumptions, right? So I always define all my assumptions. I list them out. I build pros and cons list. And then those become part of my hypothesis, right? Because I want to prove or disprove those assumptions. I want to prove or disprove my overall hypothesis. So how the problem, the problem you address is actually a problem. That's a big one, right? I might perceive it a problem. It might be a problem just for me. I don't know that until I get myself out there and start doing customer discovery. The solution proposed will actually solve the problem. Obviously, the market you plan to target has the problem. The market you plan to target will be willing to pay for the solution. I couldn't, this is the best possible, most concise way to kind of put in what you're trying to test here, right? What you're trying to make your assumptions. And these are kind of somewhat of yes or no answers. And you're just going out there to kind of figure out, is it yes or is it no? And then making pivots where you can. Sometimes, and this has happened to me lots of times, I'll get into those interviews. I'll start making 10, then 20 different interviews. And I start getting answers to my assumptions that I can't change, right? Now I know that I'm going into this non-viable space, right? I'm going into these things where my customer might be off and I can't really find another customer that has that problem. So maybe it's just my problem, or the market that we're trying to do won't, allow for that product to be sustainable for a variety of reasons. So when I start finding flaws in my hypothesis and I can't change the solution and problem to come up with a new one that can be proven, then I know I'm starting to move into this area, like I said, that we might be having a non-viable product. A lot of times I put those on the shelf and just wait. And then sometimes those things can be taken off the shelf because the time has changed, the market has changed, the environment has changed, the customers have changed. Maybe it's too small of a niche, and now the niche has grown, so it can actually be a profitable space, right? All these things kind of naturally and organically occur. Something I also do is to create customer personas to document your assumptions and hypotheses, right? So these are kind of truly breaking down the customer. We have a customer persona and value proposition canvases in the toolkit folder, and these are really good to start utilizing in this next set of homework as you're trying to define your customers. And here's something that I really like everyone to kind of try to think about, and I do this almost all the time, probably every day. As I'm breaking something down, I'm thinking very specific, like putting my shoes. Now here, remember, this is that empathy side, putting myself in the shoes of what my customer has to go through. And it's not just like at point of problem. It might be before problem occurs, right? Or before problem presents itself, right? But I'm going to think about the journey that a customer is going to take from A to B, B to C, C to D, E to E, E to F, all the way to Z, if that's what it takes. And then as I'm mapping out that journey with my personas, I'm getting a much better understanding of where I need to introduce my solution, right? Maybe it's earlier than I thought it was. Also, you start to find out where the areas that you need to educate. When we're talking about brand new products to market, disruptive products to market, then a lot of times what needs is a bit of education that comes first. They might not know they have the problem, yet they very much do. You have a brand new solution that they never even assumed could have a solution for, and now you do, right? But it's so revolutionary, it's so disruptive and innovative, you might have to actually soften the beachhead, if you will, by delivering some education. A good way to understand that is kind of building out a journey and looking at the areas where maybe they're blocked and maybe they get through, and just overall their experience in that regard. Okay, so customer discovery process. You've heard me talk about some of these numbers tonight about how many people I talk with. And I promise we're not going to make you talk to 100 people, but in our other accelerators, we do. But so this one, just know that you're kind of getting the abbreviated version, but we definitely want you to go through this process for two reasons. One is it's good to know and good to practice. And two is you're not going to be able to validate your problem, solution, and customer segmentations if you don't, right? So hit the street. That's the big thing, right? You got to put yourself out there. And I always get questions about how to do that. I got a great set of pictures of my wife, who's been my co-founder for a long time in our businesses. We were co-founders before we were married. There's a picture of her at Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco with a sandwich board, right? She got a big board on the front side. Are you selling a home? And on the back said, are you buying a home? Because we were building a technology in the real estate space. And you would be amazed how many people just came up to her and said, I'm buying. Right. And she goes, really? Okay. Are you buying in the next 14 to 30 days? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm very motivated. Okay, great. How are you marketing your house? Well, the real estate agent's taking care of it. I think she does flyers. She puts them out in front, blah, blah, blah. And I think they're online somewhere. Okay. Well, what level of traffic do you think you're getting from the marketing? It's okay. Of course, we're talking about California, so this scenario is kind of different, right? And I'm kind of blowing out the example a little bit, but the idea there is like she utilized something just to kind of put herself out there. Yeah, my wife is an extrovert too, not nearly as much as me, but that's what we're kind of talking about, right? Putting yourself out there in a position that actually can garner or elicit some feedback by having people engage with you. The other way of doing it is just being polite and talking to people in a setting that you're observing, public setting, and just say, excuse me, may I have a few minutes of your time? That's difficult to think about and difficult to do, but sometimes it's very, very important. The way I start is kind of starting with the people I know, right? I start with my friends, my family, my colleagues, and then I ask, hey, who else do you think I could talk to? And they go, well, you should go talk to Joe, or you should go talk to Jane. And then you go talk to Joe or Jane, and then you get more information. And then you didn't know Joe and Jane, but then you ask Joe and Jane how they need to talk to you. And they say Nick and Emily, right? And so you go talk to them. And so next thing you know, you just followed a thread of people and you've talked to 25 people. So it doesn't always have to be like, put yourself out there, hit the street, but in context, we're saying hit the street. And what I'm saying by that is, I know you might be an introvert, and I'm not speaking to anybody in particular, obviously, but the idea there is like, sometimes you got to put yourself out there in order to get the information you need. So, you're not wasting your time building a solution that no one's going to buy. So if you're serious about bringing this technology to market, this is going to be part of what you're going to have to do. All right. Observe and meet the prospective customers where they are, knowing your audience and knowing the location of your audience, extremely important. Be kind. Positive stimulus yields positive results, right? I like to say sometimes that I'm doing a study, or I tell my younger entrepreneurs that are in college to blame the professor and say, hey, I got to turn in an essay. You can shape it any way you want, right? Just be positive about it. Ask non-leading, open-ended questions, right? Don't say, do you like this button as it is the color pink, right? I would say, can you please do this process, where the process should result in them clicking the button, because I'm trying to find if the button is favorable to them, right? It's not about the color of the button necessarily. I want to see the feature interaction with the customer, right? So you got to think kind of open-ended and don't lead them to an answer that you might want. How do you, again, the inner therapist, how does that make you feel? Great question. Why the inner 2-year-old is also the great question. Document all findings. I can't stress it enough. You can use a tape recorder, or tape recorder. You can use a digital recorder, but you need to have permission to do that. And even in state of Tennessee, where you actually don't, single party, it's always polite. People don't want to think they're recorded when they're, you didn't tell them that, right? But ask if you can record them. That I do that all the time. Carry a great little recorder around with me and tape things all the time. But document. Follow paths that intersect to. Follow paths of interest to validate or disprove your hypothesis. Yep, the 5 whys. Keep going until your hypothesis is fully proven or disproven, right? And if it's fully disproven, kind of walking away from it, it can sometimes be the solution to the solution. So anyway, just hit the street, get yourself out there, start talking to your colleagues, start talking to your friends, start talking to your friends of friends, then friends of friends of friends. And the next thing you'll know, you'll talk to several dozen individuals. And then as I went back to it and talked about it earlier, if I'm starting to statistically see, I don't want to use that word loosely a little bit, start to kind of see a trend in the right direction where it starts to be a majority or at least a large minority of the people I'm talking to, then I know that I'm still tracking, right? If that large majority turns into a large minority and then to a medium-sized minority and then to a small minority, I know I'm going in the wrong direction, right? So that's where either there's no other direction to go and it's just dwindling down in viability, or maybe I'm, heading away from it when I need to be heading towards another direction and I just missed something in my findings to point me in the right way. Evaluate, refine, rinse, and repeat. I mean, this is an iterative process. It is a circle, hopefully a virtuous one, but sometimes you will find it to be a very vicious one as well, right? But that's teaching you what's going on with your problem and your assumptions, right? Your theories and hypotheses. So take what you learn and evolve those things. Hit the street again, keep going until you feel very confidently that you can start building a product, an MVP, a minimum viable product that's going to hit that majority of people that you talk to that now agree that your solution does fit the problem they're having and that the value proposition that they're going to benefit from matches their desired, outcome. So yes, I will use that product because it solves a problem that I'm having and I'm willing to pay for it, right? And that's the thing. And part of the tail end of the customer discovery process is also trying to start figuring out how much they're willing to pay. In some cases, when you're talking to the general market, that's a very hard thing to do, right? You're trying to figure out if they're willing to pay $9.99 or $15, right? Or maybe $14.99. I mean, these little penny things actually do matter. When you're talking about reimbursables and insurance and everything and what a hospital can bear, that's a different price structure, right? You have to understand cost and profit and everything that's going into that, plus what your contract says for discounts, this, that, and the other. You have a different component to think about, but you do need to get to that point where they're like saying, yeah, I agree with the problem. Yeah, I agree with the solution. Yeah, I agree I'm your customer. And yeah, I'll agree to pay you that, right? That's the ultimate proof case. And then obviously, if you have profit built into it, you'll be a successful company. In theory, no company that's not profitable is, well, every company that's profitable should be successful. Okay, so the typical solution, we're going to move into the solution statement. So I just went through a lot about customer discovery, and sometimes I get a lot of questions about this. So let me just stop right there before we go into the solution statement and open it up for any questions. Remember, if you're, yep, go ahead.
Sorry, if you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say, remember to come off mute.
Okay. So we're on team 3, and we're talking about a small molecule that could be taking over the market of like another small molecule because it's better. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that is a very niche sort of area, but we're trying to target like larger companies. So how would, I guess, like talking to like everyday people help to identify our sort of target customer if we're trying to target these big corporations?
Yeah. So let me ask a few questions, right? Is the everyday person going to be a customer of the business?
No.
So the business is going to buy your solution and that's your only customer.
And then potentially a niche area of scientists.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so is the question, I mean, so in this case, I wouldn't be talking to a lot of the general public, I wouldn't be wasting my time, even probably with most of my friends and family, because the context is not there. What I would be doing is getting on LinkedIn and trying to find the people that work in those businesses that I think would be a good person to start off with. Right. And I can't give you examples because I really don't know the level of context here, but maybe it is a researcher, maybe it is a scientist, maybe it's a professor, maybe it's a postdoc, maybe it's a middle administrator, maybe it's a nurse, maybe it's a nursing, a shift nurse, right? That's actually doing the shift management of the other nurses. They're not doing healthcare necessarily, they're doing administration, but they are a nurse, right? So they have the same kind of understanding and background in education. So, I mean, it's like, no, I'm saying if you go talk to the general population about your product when it's a very specific niche, you're not going to get a lot of valuable feedback. You got to figure out who to talk to that's in your niche to give you that same level of feedback.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Be creative. I mean, I think that's probably the big takeaway there is there's so many, and I'm not saying this to dog anyone or anything about this thing, right? We all know this, right? Google, this amazing thing. Or Bing, if you want to use Bing. But the idea, right, is like, probably this audience, most people ask you the questions that when we all think in our head, hey, go use Google if I had to guess about this crowd, right? And so the thing about it, it's like, we know that space, but also there's LinkedIn. Also there's, publications. Also there's just user groups. TikTok strings, depending on different things, right? So, I mean, you can look at a variety of different groupings and a variety of different organizations, a variety of different memberships, associations, groupings. This is all going back to those segmentations to try to find a group of people that you can actually talk to. So you got to be a little bit creative. Other questions?
I have a question about the how part of the problem statement.
Okay.
So the customer hypothesis says that we are trying to solve this by doing this. So while pitching the idea or like talking to customers, how detailed does the how need to be? Like, do I need to go into like the scientific literature, or do I just give them like an idea?
I think at first you give them an idea, right? You're kind of trying to, again, I'm gonna use the analogy of peeling an onion, right? And it just like each part, meaning it has layers, not that it makes you cry every time you go down, but the idea there is like each layer is a different level of information. So you might start with a very high level problem statement, elevator pitch level how, but then do follow-up questions off that how, right? So, and that can be in two forms. One is you don't have any more depth from that initial how statement in your problem statement, and you're trying to find that out. So you're asking questions to elicit more information so you can actually start generating what could be a solution, right? You don't even have a solution in mind, or you do have part of the solution in mind, but you're letting piece out by question, right? So if I told you it did this, what do you think? Okay, now if I added that it also did this, what do you think? Now, wait, let me blow your mind. If it did this on top of this, on top of this, what would you think? Right. And so that how in that problem statement, like I said, it's really just kind of a kindling to start a fire of conversation.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? All right. We're doing perfect time tonight. I love the questions and the pace is great. But we can slow down as much as we need to go into any depth that we're talking about here. And again, as a side comment, going back to what you said last week, utilizing us, sending us questions through email, pinging us any of our other contact ways, or signing up for the office hours. Those are also extra times for you to ask questions if you didn't get it in while we're doing these interactive sessions. Okay, so let's go into the solution statement. This is the other bookend to the problem, and with the customers in the middle, if you kind of think of it that way. So this is a typical solution statement, pretty similar to something else we've talked about. For the target audience of you who need V, the new product W is a solution that will do X, unlike alternative Y or solution does Z. You might not need the X, the Y, and the Z, but you do or will or have an opportunity to set the stage around why yours is better. So going back to the mRNA, right? There are two alternatives, or maybe there's more than two, but two-sided, at least categories that are effective but not effective, right? They do the work, but they don't do it well, right? So this last part, unlike alternative Y or solution, our solution does Z, that's kind of when you can kind of tail in, oh, we do it so much better, and here's how, here's why. right? So for the target audience of you who need V, the new product W is a solution that will do X, Y, and Z. All right, so here's the framework of a solution. And if you haven't guessed, yes, we're going to be doing a solution framing exercise for your homework. We're going to walk through the next few slides to kind of set that conversation up, or that homework assignment up. For the target audience, state the target user, market, or customer by naming its role or characterization group. So who are we talking about? You can go back to the problem statement. Remember, the who was there. This is the same who more than likely, unless you found out more information and you need to go back and change the problem to make a specific who, but this is the same thing, right? So the problem was, this person was suffering from the problem, and this is our target customer. But that's not always the case, right? Sometimes the patient, in this case, in this regard, sometimes the patient is the one suffering from the problem, but the solution needs to be purchased and utilized by someone upstream from them. So it's not always the same, right? So be careful in that regard. It might not be the same person. But this is the target customer here. Who, the statement of the need or opportunity, describe what the target is trying to achieve or do while it's having the problem. So describe, again, just kind of in much smaller terms, what the problem is that they're suffering from. Really, that's what you're trying to do, is illustrate the pain. Name the name of the product. Is a solution or business category. Set the context of the solution by portraying the kind of product, solution, or new business venture pursuing large opportunities it is. State the category the solution belongs to, so the audience members understand its relevance and relationship to their needs, right? So this is new in agriculture. This is new in bioscience. This is new in medical device categories. This is new in space transportation. Kind of give the overall market and kind of encapsulate the area that we're talking about, so the customer can kind of wrap their brain around the context. The statement of key benefit, the compelling reason to use a solution, these are value propositions. Highlight what the solution offers that will motivate or most interest the audience. That's the big deal, right? What will most interest the audience? This might not be at the time when you're actually selling the product and you're trying to do a direct sell to a customer. This could be the narrative that you're trying to do to an investor. So you have to know your audience, and you have to know what motivates your audience. And that's what you have to highlight here. Maybe it's the financial gain. Maybe it's just impact, right? But this is the motivation piece. And then that last, this last statement on the slide is like the unlike, right? What's the competitive alternative, and how poor is it compared to mine, right? This is like blanket, not a blanket, but a concise statement that just says, we do it better, right? Without just saying we do it better. Who do we do it better over, right? And the last one, our product statement, the primary differentiation, distinguish and sell the solution. Besides the fact that it meets the most critical need, what other interesting or attractive features are included? List key marketing points of functionality that address the problem statement, establish why stakeholders would want to need this function. What sets it apart, right? So they don't do it very well, and we do it better because of this. Okay, so wow, I ran through that rather quickly. So let me kind of back up and see if there's any questions about the solution statement. Okay, either you were asking a question on mute or there was no questions. All right, so it's pretty simple. This, yep, go ahead.
So for, you kind of went through talking about there's, customers who may be different from end users, who may be different from influencers, et cetera, especially like in a healthcare setting where you have so many people involved and like the ecosystem is so complex. When you're making a solution statement, is it appropriate to make one that might focus on each of those populations? Like, is there a solution statement that you might want to address for large hospitals who might be the payer, and a solution statement that might target your patient or the end user?
Yeah. I would be cautious about how many different types of customers I talk about or portray in my solution statement. Mm-hmm. Definitely the ones that are directly tied together, right? A patient and a hospital generally are tied together. Patient, hospital, insurance provider generally tied together, right? A statement can include all three of those parties, especially if all three are benefiting, or if one of them plays a different role, possibly even as a saboteur. And that's obviously it's a real word that we all know and love, but it's actually a business term when we're talking about trying to identify the influencers of a decision, right? So you can have multiple people as long as you're not talking about different and distinct solutions for each one of those people, right? Because then you're kind of more delivering products at different levels for different reasons. But if they're connected, if they're segmented, if they're multi-sided, going back to that other side, or if one niche is connected to another niche that this one solution would actually connect the two and make them a larger market, yeah, you can put them in here.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay, so here's where we're leaving it off tonight. And I'm going to say a few things after the homework just to kind of close it out. But what we're doing tonight is revisiting your problem statement, first of all, just to kind of polish it up after you've gotten the feedback tonight. Probably you're already working on that. If not, you have until next Wednesday to do that, but you have a few other things to do too. This is probably more of the labor this week, and then later on, it kind of picks up again when you started building out your deck, because there's a few things that I would like to try to see done, right? So, polishing up your problem statement if it needs it. Define and document a typical customer segment and the considerations for us for this. Create a customer persona for your top high value target customer, your initial customer. And if it is, multi-sided and you have two, you can put both those in there, and create a solution statement for your innovation, right? So get the problem statement kind of finished and polished up and ready to go. Start breaking down and slicing your customer into possible and probable segments with considerations. Create at least one customer profile, or persona rather, for the initial customer, the one that you're going to target the most, the one that is suffering from the problem the most, and the one that actually can buy your solution or cause someone else to buy your solution, right? And so that's important. So what I just want to kind of build on something Erica said when we're talking about these customer segmentations and everything else, is that when you're going and trying to identify the beachhead, right? Identify all the critical players that include, but also influence your primary target customer. Yeah, there's plenty of roles. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, like by movie plots and movie arcs and protagonists and antagonists and all these other things, there are people in that situation that need to be saved, right? Or need to be included in this, right? So, the patient is the one that's in need. The champion is the one that's going to deliver the solution. The saboteur is the one who's going to get in the way. That's probably your competitor, especially if your competitors are already in the hospital with a solution, with the product, and they're making lots of profit on it. Obviously, they don't want you to beat them out, right? So that might be a saboteur. Finance departments are a lot of times a saboteur because they're cutting corners. They don't want you to spend all the money, but they can also be great influencers if you bring a solution that is more cost effective than the one that's already there, right? So they can be both saboteurs as well as a tremendous point of influence. Speaking of influence, who are the influencers? Who are the gatekeepers? Who are the stakeholders? And who are the decision makers? And then also, who are the ones who write the checks? In a business, in this kind of firmographic kind of landscape that we're talking about, this big corporate environment, you might have 20 people that you have to kind of understand the motivations for, so you can understand how to motivate them to get your product in place. Healthcare is a very difficult side of the businesses. Segmentation is rather difficult. It can be that multi-sided thing where you have two customers, two consumers, and they have some sort of independent relationship, and you have to respond to both, but only one of them's paying you. So really think deep, hard, and wide about how to segment these customers and understand there's parties and players in each one of those things. And I'll look up some of those roles and send that to y'all soon, or put it into the toolkit set document on Google Drive or folder on Google Drive to kind of break down some of the things I just talked about. Okay, so that's your homework. The only other thing to do is just open it up for any general questions that you might have. Maybe about the elevator pitch video, maybe about, and I will talk about that in a second, maybe about the, the final pitch, anything you want to talk about. So let me just finish up with real quickly about the pitch video, because I've said 60-second elevator pitch, but I've never said video. So the requirement is to give us a video of your elevator pitch, right? And that's not due right now. That's due a few weeks down the road, right? So right now we're working on what will become your script for your elevator pitch: the problem, customer segmentation and identification, and solution. Those you can kind of craft in an elevator pitch. Then you can start practicing it. You kind of turn it into that well-scripted kind of 60-second snippet of what your business does and why. And then you just have to film it. That's that easy. If you want to be very creative about it, that's great. If you want to get your team in front of a camera and talk about it and each person have a little piece to play, that's great too. If you just want to sit there in front of your iPhone or your Android and do a selfie video type thing and record yourself doing the 60-second video, that's great as well. Just know that we are going to play these videos as an intro to your group and the event night as well. So if you know that, then you'll know kind of the parameters of how we're going to use it. But you might want to use it as well. You might send this to someone to kind of give a good understanding of what it is. You might post it to YouTube. Elevator pitch videos can be used a lot as you're kind of getting through this process of saying, hey, I'm looking for some feedback from someone. Let me send you this little link real quick, give you a 60-second overview of what we're talking about, right? So this could be very important to you as well. It's very important for this class. So over the next few weeks, you'll be crafting that elevator pitch and turning in a video a little bit down the way. Okay, so again, these are all the people that are bringing this to you. With a big round of thanks. We'll be doing this a lot. This is a great organization. It's going hopefully very well with what you're seeing and going through and everything else and the information that you're getting. Again, Shelby, myself, Ryan, Erica, Rohan, we're all here to help, right? Shelby and I definitely on the entrepreneurship side and on this education side and just kind of walking you through these things. But remember, Rohan, Eric, and Ryan have all gone through this several years. They've been participants in this. They understand the space. So if you have just general feedback questions, you're needing some insights on just how the process goes and some of the other things you're thinking about, you can reach out to them too. We have the office hours sign-up sheet up in the Google Drive. You should all have a link. We sent that one email that's got all those links. Go in there and schedule time to talk to us. We'll look on that thing tomorrow morning and right before we start. And if there's no one signed up, then we get an early weekend. And if everybody's signed up, then we hammer it out over those 2 hours and hopefully answer everybody's questions. Again, you have our email addresses. I just changed mine. I sent you a new one. So you have that now. Shelby and everyone else is copied on that email as well. So you can ask us individually or as a group. If there's not anything else, we'll open it up one final time for any questions. Love the hair, Erica. Okay, then I'm gonna call it a night. I had a great time. Can't wait till next week. Looking forward to the homework. Got a little bit more this week than last week. Y'all take care.
Thank you.